Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Luxury Network webinar series around travel post-COVID. I'm delighted to be joined today by Caroline Bremner, who's the head of travel at Euromonitor International, and our panelists, Mike Bonner, the marketing director at Rosewood London, and Christopher, the CEO of Flyleet Jets. Today, we're going to be looking about the impact of COVID, post the pandemic, and excited that both Mike and Caroline and Chris can join us a year on. We're going to start with a presentation which Caroline's going to talk us through for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to lead into Q&A with the panelists. So I'd like to hand over to Caroline to take us through the presentation.
Great. Well, thank you, Helena, for inviting me to present again with you all today. It's been a very challenging year for everybody. And so it's great to be able to come back and share the latest insights with you. There are obviously challenges still in the travel and tourism industry, but also there are opportunities, especially for luxury travel. And we're also seeing a lot of transformation happening in the digital and sustainability space. So these are some of the key themes that we'll be talking through today. But first of all, I will spend a little bit of time just presenting the latest global view of international travel and tourism. And then we'll look more in detail at luxury consumers and any sort of changes that we've seen post-pandemic. And then I also have examples of sustainable and digital transformation. And we'll just wrap up with those opportunities for luxury travel before we go into the Q&A. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Euromonitor International, I know that you work very closely with my colleague Fleur Roberts at the Luxury Network, but we are a global research company. We have 15 offices around the world and hundreds of analysts that are in countries monitoring what is happening, especially, which has been so critical during this very challenging year of COVID-19. Where things still remain very dynamic and very fluid. So let's take a look at the latest view of travel and tourism. So on a global level, when we look at inbound tourism spending, we can see that last year was, unprecedented. This is such an overused word, but it really was an incredibly challenging year. We saw travel and tourism in spending terms decline by 75%. This, we've never seen the likes of this before, not even with, 9/11, the great financial crisis, SARS, all the terrible tragedies that the industry has suffered. So we know that 2020 was a very challenging year. A lot of the year, the tourism industry was closed. And as we we're already halfway through 2021, and still many sort of restrictions and bans remain in place. So the recovery, and if we start with the rebound is expected to start taking place in 2021, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. So therefore, we have created 3 different COVID-19 scenarios. We have 2 pessimistic scenarios and 1 more optimistic one. And the baseline is that we do start the recovery this year with the rebound. And that would mean that, there would be some level of tourism demand from mid-year onwards as we see the likes of the EU opening up and, tourism able to start up again. However, we're still expecting a very large shortfall compared to those pre-crisis 2019 levels of potentially, 60-odd%. So, best case scenario, we are looking at, say, 2024 for volume to recover, but for spending, it's going to be a bit longer, with at least, 6 years potentially to recover to those 2019 levels. And of course, as I said, it's still very unclear and uncertain about the speed and the rate of the recovery, because we still are faced with these ongoing travel bans and restrictions. And the nature of these is that it's very dynamic. It all pivots on the development of cases, new variants, as we've seen recently with the Delta variant. And of course, much of the world still remains in some form of restriction or travel ban. We look at Mexico and think, wow, that's great, they're open, but the rest of us are still really struggling to get to that point. So, we are a year and a half into the pandemic, really. And what we've seen is that the level of pessimism has actually subsided, and there is growing optimism in the industry. And we can very much put that down to the success of the vaccine, the mass vaccinations that are taking place across the world. I mean, to date, there have been 3 billion first dose vaccinations or second dose vaccinations, and around 20% or more of the world has been vaccinated. In some countries like the UK, it's over 60%. However, there are these very large barriers to recovery, as we can see, and particularly for travel and tourism, which is based on in-person experiences. It's not easy to pivot to like online or virtual. We saw a little bit of that with virtual tours and virtual experiences. People really want to go and live life and enjoy, being on holiday. So there are challenges in terms of the government restrictions, the nature of the industry. But I think, we are seeing that people in the industry are feeling a lot more optimistic than they were this time last year. Equally, when we look at the different regions of the world, so this is looking at regional inbound spending, we can see that certain regions, even, Asia Pacific, which is the key driver of growth in the industry, is going to take a relatively long time to recover. The earliest we expect recovery to those pre-crisis levels is 2024. Asia Pacific still remains, beset by the pandemic, exacerbated by the Delta variant, uncoordinated restrictions and bans in place. It's all a bit bilateral. And then, of course, there's even longer recovery for some of the more mature markets, as we're seeing Australasia, Australia not really set to open up until at least next year. And then, of course, Western Europe, which is a very mature market, but will take a bit longer to recover to those pre-crisis levels, despite the fact that we are looking at, the launch of the EU Digital Health Scheme, which starts in tomorrow, across the whole of the EU zone, which is really going to be very important and instrumental in reopening. Of course, when we look at Europe in more detail, there are some destinations that have performed very well during this challenging time, even though they've seen these enormous drops. But we can see, the Mediterranean destinations or the Adriatic destinations such as Greece, Croatia, performing well, coming out of the stocks relatively quickly. We also know that it's going to be slower for some other destinations that, again, it's to do with the pace of recovery, the pace of the vaccines, and also the fact that they may be suffering from more, being a mature destination such as France or Spain. And even with Spain reopening, it's now on the sort of, opening up to the EU demand, as we're seeing across Europe. There's still complications because when you look at, the Spain is not on the green list, but some of the islands are, such as the Balearics. So yeah, it's not a clear-cut recovery. Equally, when we look at the outbound source markets, of course, we know that there's a lot of revenue comes from the major source markets of China, Europe and the US. And, you know, over the midterm, we expect China to really sort of return to international travel and begin, you know, that strong growth trajectory that we saw pre-crisis. But in the short term, very much the domestic market, we can see, particularly in China and the US, is really where there's a lot of focus, particularly by the global brands as they tap into that sort of pent-up domestic market. Of course, you know, what we don't just look at tourism flows, we also look at the actual categories, the travel products in the market. And of course, across the board, it was over, you know, 50% or more declines for major categories such as airlines or, you know, cruise, travel agents, etc. But coming out of the you know, the rebound, we expect online and especially mobile travel to be a key growth catalyst. And, you know, we know that travel businesses, only about 40% of them actually provide a consumer-facing mobile app. And, you know, this is a key place to really connect with travelers and to, you know, provide that real-time information, that trust, and you know that's what they're looking for. And equally, you have that opportunity to communicate with them across the customer journey, which is so vital in this post-COVID world. You know, digital health schemes, as I mentioned, the EU digital health pass or certificate. We've got, you know, the IATA pass, you know, the common pass. There's so many of them. But what, you know, the important thing is, you know, from discussions with industry, that these are interoperable. And already with the news that, you know, Malta is now on the green list for the UK, but then they won't accept the NHS digital health app. So there is a challenge of making sure that all these schemes speak to each other. And we can see that consumers are happy to use them. The data from IATA shows that 84% of them want an app to manage their health credentials so that they can move seamlessly through the process of traveling. So let's now turn and look in more detail at those consumer shifts. So, you know, one really interesting fact that we saw during last year and coming into early this year is that consumers continue to be really engaged with sustainability. And, you know, looking at luxury consumers, so those are those earning over 100,000 or 150,000 plus, 66% of them want to have a positive impact on the environment during their daily actions. And that then also translates into how and, you know, what they choose when they're choosing, you know, a travel provider. We also have the fact that the whole, you know, purpose-driven brands resonates well. So those are the, you know, the B Corp brands, the brands that very much prioritize the environment, social concerns, and, you know, have that sort of triple bottom line approach. We can see that, you know, particularly in the, you know, very high level, high net worth individual level, consumers in Spain, Japan, and Australia, purpose-driven brands are, you know, really resonating very well. Whereas, you know, we can also see in the sort of 100+ income group that they're very popular with consumers from the emerging markets such as India and China. And also we can see Italy here. So you can see that luxury consumers are more engaged with purpose-driven brands than the average consumer. Equally, we can see that luxury consumers are also very interested in brands that put their sort of political and social credentials, you know, front and center. So they are very strong in brand activism. So again, I've been able to sort of hone in on those high net worth individuals, say from Japan, China, Brazil, France, that higher income group very much, you know, over 60% of Chinese high income earners are, you know, are gravitating and are attracted to brands that have a strong social and political, you know, approach and that activism that I mentioned. Equally, as I meant, also the fact that, you know, we can see greater levels of engagement with sustainability in their daily lives, but also when luxury consumers are choosing travel, we can see that, yes, they are concerned about a safe destination, or they're more interested in, they're looking for relaxation. But actually looking at April or January 2020 to 2021, we saw increased interest in nature-based tourism, volunteering, ecotourism specifically, and sort of a rolling back, less interest in those kind of urban centres where there's shopping or arts and culture or group tours and city breaks. So, I mean, these are trends that we see play out in the general market, but equally we're seeing it also in the luxury end. There's been a massive pivot during that sort of pause in the travel industry. We've seen the emergence of, the Future of Tourism Coalition, more and more destinations working with the Global Tourism Council. Hi.
Hi.
I think I lost you there.
I lost you.
Are we back?
Yes, I think we're back.
Great. So I'm not sure where we started or ended there, but I was saying the importance of sustainability in the recovery for destinations is really fundamental. And so what we have at Euromonitor is the fact that we have global consumers. 48% of them are already choosing sustainable travel features, or when they're looking at a destination or a tourism provider. And equally, we can see this, as well in the emerging markets of China, Poland, France, Europe. We also see strong interest in sustainability in terms of travel features. Equally, we have, we've built a sustainable travel index at Euromonitor to help with this transition to a more sustainable travel and tourism offer. And not surprisingly, Scandinavia and Europe lead the ranking. We see, Sweden that has been on this sustainable transformation for decades, but also the level of engagement with their travel businesses is really high. So 65% of Swedish travel businesses offer some form of sustainability tourism strategy, compared to an average globally of 55%. And then, of course, we have this, this data that we've built for over 99 countries. Here we're looking at the country performance of the Med and the Adriatic. We can see that Croatia is performing really well in terms of overall sustainability, along with the likes of France. But then when we dig deep into environmental sustainability, here we can see the likes of, Croatia and Slovenia doing well. Social sustainability is particularly strong in Eastern European destinations. And then in terms of a sustainable tourism demand, we have, again, Italy, Slovenia, where we have a good balance between domestic tourism that are spending, relatively high, and that's balanced with the international tourism demand. Again, driving that average spend per trip. Of course, there are many lessons from last year, and we can see that, the big issue pre-crisis was over-tourism. If we look at Dubrovnik in particular, there is this big push to not go back to, the volume-driven model per se. They are asking their residents and seeing, what type of tourism or tourist are they happy to welcome to Dubrovnik. So that important piece of gauging consumer sentiment, and especially resident sentiment, and also being very open about the negative and positive impacts of tourism, and of course measuring those impacts. Equally, we know that airlines have really struggled, and it's quite interesting because you see many carriers struggling and looking to government bailouts for survival. But then on the other hand, we see the rise of new airline startups, such as Flyer, which is Norwegian, and they're very much putting the consumer first, and everything is built around the app. It's very consumer centric, and it sort of builds in this need for flexibility, cancellation policies, etc. And of course, they are aware of their environmental impact, so they are not going to pursue volume-driven demand, but more value-driven, and where it's really essential to have these connections intra-Europe and then within Norway itself. So let's turn to these opportunities for the luxury travel sector. Well, I would say that there's huge opportunity to move into different parts of the customer journey. So here we're looking at vertical integration by Singapore Airlines. While they couldn't fly, the fleet was grounded, they turned to offering experiences. And of course, they were targeting their domestic market, but that can easily be scaled up and rolled out regionally and globally. So they have their new Pelago brand that launched in October 2020. It's an interesting new revenue stream. And of course, it's another way of building engagement and connections with your consumer base, and ultimately drive that trust and loyalty, which will be fundamental, of course, to any brands that are looking for a sustainable recovery. Then we also have this very interesting example of Sherpa, for example, working with the likes of BA, Expedia, and other airlines, American Express. And this illustrates the importance of partnerships. Travel brands are not experts in, health protocols or vaccination or, all these kind of new health and safety protocols or travel restrictions. Whereas you can partner with brands such as Sherpa that can do that legwork for you. And of course, they can be plugged in onto your website. It's all sort of kept up to date, real time. And that's what consumers are looking for. Already 56% of travel businesses provide a 24/7 service. There's huge potential to accelerate that as well, because ultimately that's what consumers need when they're before the trip, but equally during the trip. This end-to-end seamlessness is something that we've definitely seen accelerated. Here we're looking at Duv, which is a sort of Israeli company that provides end-to-end digital hotel services for guests of hotel brands. So everything is joined up, it's very seamless, it's linked to the property management systems. And of course, it sort of provides that consumer service of online check-in, pre-arrival. It allows for mobile key, seamless entry into the room. It allows for additional add-ons, driving incremental revenue through, buying experiences, maybe once you're in destination. So again, this idea of, the seamlessness of travel that's so important as well. Also, it's how do you then use automation to push forward the real value added insights that your staff can deliver. And already we see 50% of travel businesses are offering some form of self-service check-in and mobile key for this contactless post-COVID world. So I'd just like to summarize and just to say that for us at Euromonitor, we can see huge opportunities for the luxury travel sector. And it kind of fits well with the transformation that we're seeing in the industry, this kind of paradigm shift away from volume driven to quality value driven tourism. It's what destinations want, it's what residents want, and equally consumers are keen and willing to pay for that. Brands that have a passion, that have strong environmental and social credentials are resonating very well, particularly at the higher income levels. And of course, that purpose, really appeals to luxury travelers. We're seeing this ongoing digital and sustainable transformation. Those are long-term trends. They're not going anywhere. And if anything, they've been accelerated by the pandemic. And there's a real opportunity to, leverage those tools such as, seamlessness that you can derive from data analytics, artificial intelligence, etc. And of course, we have to think about that elevated consumer-centric experience. Consumers are looking for brands that they can trust, that understand them, but also speak to them and support them throughout the whole of the customer journey. So this holistic approach to, the traveler journey is so important. And I just, obviously really looking forward to the Q&A with Chris and Mike to hear what they think about the trends that I've presented.
Thank you so much, Caroline. If we could now bring in Mike and Christopher, if you could just share your screens. Hello, both. I think Christopher's there as well. Caroline, firstly, thank you so much. That was really insightful. And I think building on the trends that we talked about last year, I can't believe it was a year ago, which were exactly what you exacerbated there with digital sustainability experiences. And we also spoke a bit about wellness last year. And those trends really are, as you described, coming into key focus within the luxury space. So perhaps I could start with Mike at the Rosewood. Perhaps you could just tell us how you see your year within the hotel industry at a high-end hotel, and how those trends perhaps resonate with you and what you're doing within your organization.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. Probably an understatement, but yeah, we're now back. We stayed open during the last lockdown for those business travelers who are allowed to stay under the exemption. So, but from 17th of May, we're open to all guests from any whether it's leisure guests or corporate guests. So we are seeing guests come back. Obviously, with the current international restrictions, it's quite limited. It's mostly a domestic market at the moment. But what we are seeing, people coming back, yes, we're definitely seeing this move towards kind of sustainability. The CSR thing is really playing. People are looking for wellness, particularly. We're seeing quite a high demand for people looking to look after their physical health and their mental health. And when they're going to stay at hotels, seeing what we can offer in that respect. So we launched a program recently called Placemakers Program, working with a couple of wellness experts called Katie Miller and Boniface Fernie Karen, who are experts in the kind of wellness of mind and body. So you can do online classes with them. They do bar classes. So our guests can engage with that. And we're also seeing that on the food side as well. People are wanting the healthy options. So working very much with our culinary teams to ensure that all our restaurants and bars, which are actually doing quite well, and they are quite busy. Here at the hotel, we've traditionally enjoyed a lot of local business, and we are seeing good numbers coming into our bars and restaurants in Scarce Bar and Holborn Dining Room. But people are looking for those healthy options, and we need to make sure that we cater to those with all the food and the ingredients that we offer. Whilst we do have very hearty pies, and we're known for our pies here in Holborn Dining Room and the Pie Room, we do offer the lighter options as well for those who are looking for them.
Okay, excellent. And in terms of the sustainability side and the digitalization, is that something that you're looking to sort of integrate as well?
Absolutely. Or, yeah, we do a number of programs. I mean, pre-pandemic, as a group, Rosewood globally has sustainability at the heart of its kind of ethos globally and here at the hotel. So we'd already pre-pandemic started to move toward less printed collateral, where it's, where it can be reduced using recycled materials. Utility usage throughout the hotel has been reduced. Switching all our light bulbs now, more environmentally friendly light bulbs. But we also do a lot in the community space around the hotel as well, with the local community, again, working with the homeless in the Holborn area, feeding, we do charity feeding programs. And we carry on with that. We work with our charity partners here in the UK. We partner with Great Ormond Street Hospital. So we do a lot of fundraising for Great Ormond Street as well. So yeah, it's something that we're doing more. We actually have on our roof, we have a garden and some beehives. So we produce honey, and in the garden we have herbs and plants that are then brought down and used in our kitchens and in our cocktail making as well. So it's all about reducing miles as much as we can when we're sourcing materials and sourcing ingredients.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. Christopher, I know that we've spoken a few times about initiatives within experiences and your sort of customer base looking to obviously escape the pandemic last year. So you actually saw a slight influx of clients, but in a different way. So you must have had a few challenges, to Caroline's point, around giving them the information that they needed around travel, both leaving the country and entering into different countries. And then also, I guess, the mentality as well of your clientele about wanting to escape and have a very different experience for their families in a safe way. So perhaps you can talk to those.
Yeah, we've got a complete circle. So we, from sort of February through till about March and April, we were doing emergency repatriation flights from countries that were about to lock down, and there were people that were stranded there by airlines that weren't going to return them home. So we were approached by a number of governments to fly people home, and quite a few are very vulnerable. So we did that, and then we also had people jetting away to escape the pandemic on islands, in isolated villas, all that sort of thing. And now there's a new shift where people are looking to get away, and there's a big emphasis on wellness retreats. So it's kind of spa, yoga, that sort of stuff. So not the traditional holidays of jetting away and having a few beers and things, but it's very much about looking after yourself. And there's more family travel happening now, much more than before. Previously, it was quite male dominated. Now it's very much the whole family's traveling together. Yeah, I mean, it's the trend is evolving. So this is only kind of in the last few months this has started to happen, but we think there'll be more demand for people holidaying on super yachts, holidaying in isolated villas, and holidaying in spa and wellness retreats, avoiding those larger venues where they're potentially going to come in contact with people, just in case there's another variant around the corner, and then they're forced into a quarantine again.
Okay. And just in terms of sort of the information, the digitalization of that, I mean, we had a quick chat yesterday. I think Mike as well mentioned that complete difficulty around government websites. It's not in real time. Have you experienced any sort of shift towards using these digitalized platforms, or how have you been managing that?
It's been the biggest challenge, I would say, because we've had to spend a lot of time and energy on keeping bang up to date, not just with UK government information, but also all the destinations that people may go to and are going to, because it changes constantly, and quite often the information that's provided doesn't marry up. So you've got a very different picture for, yes, you'll be okay when you arrive, and no, you won't. And it's, customers are coming to us and asking us, can I go into this country? Am I going to have to quarantine? Is it safe? So yeah, we've had to spend a lot of time getting up to date with that. Our main source of information has been through government websites, because ultimately they decide whether you enter or not. But it was very interesting yesterday when we did the run through and hearing about the different sources of information that are available, which are possibly more up to date than what we're getting. It's very much been our responsibility, duty of care towards our clients to make sure, yes, they are going to be able to attend that country for business or for a family holiday. We don't want to have a situation where a client's turning around and saying, you know, I was forced into a quarantine and you didn't tell me. So we have to really do our homework to make sure that they're going to be okay.
Okay, thank you. So just to say to the floor, if anyone wants to ask a question, and I've got some coming through now, you can use the Q&A tool, so you can just post your questions there. I've got one question actually back to Caroline, and it's about the case study of Dubrovnik. And it's just interesting that you were saying about the sort of balancing sort of the influx of people into a country and being mindful of the sustainability. And the question is, how do you see that balance happening? Because presumably places like Spain and Greece, etc., rely heavily on tourism, right? So it's, you know, at what point are the residents going to have the power to sort of control that? Who's making those decisions about inbound tourism? Ultimately, is it a government decision? And how does that play out and balance against the economy? Because ultimately, sustainability is one part of a bigger picture.
This is a really great question. And yeah, it's kind of, that is the challenge. You know, if you think pre-crisis, we were seeing anti-tourism backlashes in key sort of flashpoints, whether it was Venice or, you know, Barcelona, here where I am in Scotland, you know, in Edinburgh, for example, during peak times. And what we're seeing is this realization by the destination management, sort of the DMOs. You know, there's more joined up thinking between the DMOs and the tourism boards. And so, you know, the national tourism boards are now very sort of aware of this issue, that, you know, that the destination has to be looked after, not just for the environment, but also, you know, because of the wellness of the local population, but equally because of the economic benefits. So we're seeing more of a sort of joined up thinking about sustainable tourism development. And if you look at countries such as New Zealand, they have like a resident sentiment survey. So every so often they're asking the population, are you happy with the way that we're managing tourism? Are you seeing the benefits? And, you know, these are the key questions, so that the residents also are kind of on the same page, because they can see this delicate balance between the need to attract tourists, but also the need to protect themselves because of COVID, but also, you know, protecting the environment. So it's such a complex, you know, question. But if you don't bring in all the stakeholders, you're not going to get it right. So that's why as I say, there seems to be more. We work with many destinations around the world. And so, for example, if you look at the Caribbean, they're working with the likes of the Travel Foundation. You can see so many destinations signing up to the Future of Tourism Coalition. So these are the NGOs that have come together as this kind of super group. As I mentioned, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, they're working every month, they've got new members. So, you know, it's not like we didn't know about this, but I think COVID has really shone a light on it. And because of COVID and the social distancing issues, we have to, you know, it's given another sort of extra reason to get it right when you do open up, because otherwise it's just going to be stop, start. But then, you know, 5-10 years down the line, we won't have also met the Paris Agreement targets of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So it feels like there's this convergence of COVID with the climate crisis. And that's why those destinations opening that up now should really be factoring in consumers, residents, tourism players, and, you know, obviously governments themselves.
Sure. Thank you. That's a really full answer. And I think, just to further that, especially in the UK, you have, obviously you mentioned New Zealand there. I'm not sure how much that is happening in the UK, because we can see, everyone's going down to Cornwall, for example. And, that's a very small place with a big influx of ultimately high net worth who either buying up homes there or holidaying there. And it's, potentially in the detriment of the local community, but also supporting them. So that's interesting. One other question that's come in is around this new resurgence of the airline industry. And Christopher, maybe you can talk a bit to that. Are you aware potentially of any new competition, or do you see, private jets sort of now being just for the sort of wealthy individuals, or do you see more and more sort of lower income bracket families using your service, in terms of the sort of, obviously that they can afford to use it, but they're slightly more inclined to spend money in that way to get away? Or are they just moving to a different airline to get away? Because I think you can hire a private jet now, as I understand, and collectively go away. You can sell seats. I think there was one brand, perhaps not the one that Caroline mentioned, but there are these new initiatives where you can club together and actually hire one between about 16 people. Is that my understanding correct?
Yeah, that service has been offered by a number of different companies over the years.
Yeah.
I don't see that, pardon the pun, taking off, because the whole sharing of an aircraft, the whole purpose of private jet is it's yours. There's nobody else on board. If you share an aircraft to lower the ticket price, it's a sort of wasted exercise, because you might as well be on an airliner. The big advantage that traveling by private jet is that you avoid the busier airports. You're not on a shared aircraft. You're flying direct in and out of smaller airfields. And quite often we can arrange what's known as car to jet transfers. So you literally step from the car onto the jet, you're pre-cleared, everything's done for you. I don't see sharing of jets being a popular thing. One of the things we're pushing is the empty legs that we have. So empty legs are when an aircraft is positioning either back to base or to another flight empty, which is wasted fuel, it's carbon footprint that can be put to good use. So we are quite busy selling those, and it enables people to fly for less than half the price that it would normally cost them. So that's one of the things we're doing. There's different sizes of jets. Jets, generally speaking, generally the newer jets get more energy efficient, so they use less fuel. They're made of more environmentally friendly materials. The bigger the jet, obviously, the bigger the emission. But private jets serve a market, which, it's not for everyone. You can fly on a private jet for £3,000-4,000 into Europe on a short distance. But in general, it's for the people that are on a higher income. They haven't got the time or the energy to waste in an international airport. And certainly they don't want to incur some of the queues that happened at Heathrow recently, which was, dreadful. I mean, there's something we found, and we did some surveys amongst our clients. There's something called travel anxiety. And people genuinely have anxiety about going away. They're desperate to go away, but they're terrified of the whole travel experience, getting there, potentially getting COVID, being quarantined, what's the health system like, etc. So they're turning to us to provide much more of a cradled travel experience where, they're really turning to us to look after them, and the what if questions, what if I get ill, what's the hospital like, etc. So we're providing much more of a higher level of care to clients. It's not for everyone, don't get me wrong. Not everyone can afford to fly privately, but I would say that there's definitely been a shift between companies that previously wouldn't have their executives flying privately because of the cost or the perceived cost. But the fuel price is lowered, so flying is actually cheaper now. And it makes economic sense to fly into somewhere, maybe 2 or 3 different locations in one day, do those meetings one day and fly home. you know, you're at far less risk doing that than staying overnight, bumping up your travel time. You can be in and out really quick. Yeah, we've had more families using us where they previously would have flown, say, business or first, and now flying privately because they want to have the extra assurance that they're a bit more protected when they fly. So, yeah, I mean, we have things in place where all the aircraft are clinically sanitized. It takes several hours to do it. It's quite costly, but it's what we've got to do. So the entire aircraft is sanitized inside. Everything is packaged in environmentally friendly packaging. The metal cutlery is clinically clean, so it's spotless. So there's a lot more going into the travel experience now than previously. Mm-hmm. And I think it gives people more reassurance that they're going to be safe and they're going to be looked after, and they won't get locked down when they get there.
And I guess also, which we haven't touched upon, but another question that's come in is about the vaccine passport, and how presumably that's going to have an impact, which we don't know yet because obviously it's all a bit uncertain. So are there any thoughts on that, Caroline or Mike, about, or Chris, even just how you see that happening, and how potentially the impact would be for international travel? Caroline, maybe you had some insights from your research.
I would say, just from conversations with industry and the likes of the World Travel and Tourism Council, there is a concern that you can't just have everything based on the vaccine passport, because the vaccination process, as we can see, it's not yet sort of really gone across the whole world. Mm-hmm. And so you can also see that there's a concern that it's not equitable or shared, and we need to avoid discrimination. So I think it's these schemes are critical for reopening, but they are not the only piece of the puzzle. And so I think what we're seeing is the importance of testing as well, the importance of proof of having antigens, or having recovered from the disease. So those are the three areas: vaccination, testing, plus proof of antigens. So I would say that's really important, that we also sort of, yes, it's great that, say, the UK's vaccinated 60% of its population, but we also need to look at other destinations that we're traveling to, and helping those that, and supporting schemes like COVAX. Why is the travel industry not saying, well, if you've had your vaccine, why not pay forward that vaccine and support the COVAX scheme? So these are, ideas that I've kind of toyed with when I've been researching this.
So could you just give us a bit more information about the COVAX scheme? Do you mean?
Well, that's the COVAX is the sort of equitable distribution of vaccine by the likes of the World Health Organization. I think it's the run by Garvey, and they are this group that are they go and ask developed countries for a donation to donate some of their vaccination supplies to countries that can't afford to buy their own. So that's what I say. It's like more equitable sharing of the vaccine globally, because that's what the WHO is saying, that we're not all safe until everybody's safe.
Exactly. Yeah. Brilliant. I think we're coming up to the time of our 1 hour, but if there's anyone else has any questions to put forward, then please do raise a hand. I think that's it for the moment. Does anyone else want to contribute anything? Closing remarks? No? Okay, well, thank you all very much. Caroline, wonderful as ever to hear from you and the insights, and also to Mike and Christopher for sharing their experiences. The presentation has been recorded, so that would be available to anyone that's perhaps listening or joined a bit later. So we'll have that available for you, and look forward to welcoming you back for our next webinar in a few weeks' time around the luxury goods industry.